Hello and welcome to Dungeoneered, a podcast dedicated to discussing Dungeons and Dragons. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Josh.
Let's do this. Hey, so this week, well, first of all, for a recap on our Lukewarm Opens, it's been wild and crazy out here, so I'm going to kind of bring it in, I think, a little bit this week. Sound good for you,
that.
Josh? I figured you would. But I kind of wanted to dive a little bit into animated movie world, because we have been talking about like entertainment books and things like that. So I wanted to jump into the animated movie world, and I wanted to ask what your favorite animated movie was. And trust me, this is going to be a thing.
There are
going to
two
take
of
a little
them.
bit. Okay.
Actually, no, I'm going to have to say three. I'm going to have to go with three. There's too many good ones out there.
I think we have to do parameters first too, though. Does anime, like an animated movie, count as an animated movie?
Yes, that is the only ones. That is what I've been counting. That's what I'm including.
Okay. Because that can be a hotly debated topic.
Anything that's animation is what we're talking about right now. Anything where somebody on a computer animated something. That includes anime. That includes American animation.
Because that might change my list up a little bit. It might. It truly might. Because, you know, the age-old question of, like, is Avatar The Last Airbender an anime, you know? Or
it doesn't
a cartoon?
Matter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's a nonsense conversation that means nothing. It doesn't. Nobody's life's changed by the result being one way or another.
Ooh, I don't know. My life might be changed if Avatar The Last Airbender was an anime, you know?
I mean, it is.
That's heavy to consider. No, it's a cartoon.
Whatever. I don't care. It doesn't matter.
You're like, whatever.
I will say
anyways,
my favorite
continue.
movies are my favorite animated movies are Your Name,
Okay, that's a good choice. That's a really good choice.
A Silent Voice.
Oh, another very good choice.
Oh, I've seen both those movies so many times, and I cry every single time.
They are crying inducing, that is for sure. They're very
and then
good.
I
haven't seen
think
them in
I have a
forever.
hard time with my third one, but I think I'm just gonna say it's a tie between two. It's a tie between these are ones that are mainly because they're just so nostalgic for me. I think one is because I think it's a genuinely fantastic movie, and the other one is a good movie, but I think it also gets higher up on the list because of nostalgia. Is My Neighbor Totoro and Princess Mononoke.
Yes, great choices. Wonderful choices. Why My Neighbor Totoro? Why? Just because nostalgia?
So it's not the best movie. Like, I wouldn't rewatch it a million and one times, but my oldest sister was obsessed with it. Like, she's 10 years older than me, obsessed with it. And we watched it so many times growing up that not only did I know all the Japanese words to the songs, to the opening song.
Yeah.
Even though I knew no Japanese, I could sing that song. Like, there's just such a nostalgia behind that now of, like, that is my childhood.
I honestly don't know if I can even point a top 3 favorite for animated movies. Obviously, I love Disney movies. I'm a pretty big Disney nerd. I just they're just wholesome and fun.
See,
so
I've watched most
of
them. I don't know if I'd ever put one in, like, these are my top. I would never, like...
Yeah.
Tarzan was good. I loved the soundtrack, but it also is the one soundtrack that killed the Disney in its prime, like the Disney...
Renaissance or
the
whatever.
Renaissance, that's the word, thank you.
Yeah.
It killed the Disney Renaissance because it went against the idea that every other Disney movie was going for, which was make it a musical.
Yep. Yeah.
So the rules of musicals had to be followed.
Yeah, but there's some really good Disney movies after the Disney
No, there
Renaissance.
are, but I don't know if I'd ever put them as number one. The only one that might get up there, like real high up there, is the Goofy movie.
I've never seen the Goofy movie. I've never seen it.
What it is it came out after all of the Disney Renaissance and stuff.
Oh boy.
And when they were making not the best movies, but it followed the Disney Renaissance thing. Like the way that the songs and everything in it was designed and laid out, it literally follows the rules of a musical. And it was phenomenal. But a lot of people, one, didn't see it and just didn't understand how amazing it was at the time.
Is Emperor's New Groove a Disney movie? Is that a Disney movie?
Yeah.
because that doesn't follow. That's one that I always think of.
But
That's
no,
a really good movie that
but
doesn't
see, those
follow
don't
the.
those aren't. There's no singing in that.
No, absolutely none.
So it's not. It doesn't need to follow the rules of a
No.
musical. It doesn't matter at that point.
Yeah, but I always every time somebody brings up like Disney Renaissance and they don't make any movies.
But
that are good after
Atlantis was
that.
also phenomenal.
Well, that's where I'm gonna go here. So, I think a hidden gem that a lot of people don't know about, I think, be surprising is Atlantis.
You would not say. You're wrong if you say not a lot of people know about it.
Really? You think a lot of people?
It was huge when it came out.
Was it? I don't
It
even
was
remember when it came out.
huge.
Because every time I talk about people with animated movies or even just Disney movies as a topic, either
I just think it gets lost. I don't think it was. I think a lot of people saw it, but I think people just forget about it.
Yeah, well, I think that's, I think it, like you said, I think it gets kind of lost in the catalog of Disney because, um, it's one of my favorite Disney movies of all time. I don't know if it's in my favorite animated movies. Like competing with like Spirited Away and stuff like that is a really, really difficult task. I mean, Spirited Away is like one of my top 3 favorite movies of all time.
It was a really good movie. I think there were parts of it that scared me as a child.
Yeah.
So I don't think it doesn't hold as much nostalgia as the other ones for me. Even Prince Mononoke had things that were scary, like the boar and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But like, there's
something unsettling about about Spirited Away for sure.
Very much, and some of the ghosts and things that were very. That was the one with the parents turned to pigs, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was that scar.
Yep.
That was like I had to look away. It was horrifying.
I didn't watch Spirited Away. Well, I didn't watch any Miyazaki movies or really any animated movie outside of Disney movies until high school. So I didn't get that fun nostalgia factor with those movies that I do with like Disney movies, like Aladdin and things like that.
Interesting.
Like I'll watch Aladdin, and I love Aladdin, but I mean it's a great movie, but I have a nostalgia factor that kind of impacts a lot of my liking for that movie.
Yeah. Which is wild to me because those were super my childhood.
Yeah. So I didn't get to watch those. I mean, I didn't even know they existed, but I took Japanese in high school, and every time we had a substitute teacher, we would watch those in class. We would watch a Miyazaki movie in class. So Ponyo, Spirited Away,
I don't think I've ever seen Ponyo. That's the one.
Great. It's wonderful.
It's just I have only seen very brief promotional material, and it never drew me in, and I was like, I'm good. I don't need to.
It's really good, but it's not my favorite. Anna, do you remember Anna? My cousin Anna? Yeah, that's her favorite Miyazaki movie. It's not my favorite. It's probably one of my least favorite Miyazaki movies, but I still love it. It's very wholesome. It's very fun. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Atlantis more so than anything else because I've been really fascinated just in general and in my world building over the last few weeks because I've been trying to write a book and write stories and stuff like that. I've been really fascinated with underwater civilizations and creating underwater civilizations that are unique and fun. And obviously in Atlantis, you have an underwater civilization, and the entire premise of the movie is the journey to get there and, trying to find Atlantis. So my question for you is, do you create underwater civilizations? Obviously in D&D, it's really easy to do because you have like literally underwater races, like races that you can play as and be underwater. Do you think about underwater very often?
Yeah.
Because I actually think people don't often. I don't think they do.
I think a lot of people let it go.
Yeah.
I have because I find it very interesting.
Yeah.
But I will say the world where I made it the most important, I ended up canceling that and being like, no, let's start on a different story.
Wait, why? Why?
Well, just because I didn't like where I didn't start it well. I didn't there was things about the campaign that just wasn't going well in terms of and we started playing it because the other campaign was still going on. But people would call out, so we're like, "Hey, if there's not enough to play our normal campaign, why don't we start the other campaign, the next one?" And then before we actually finished the first campaign, it was like, "Hey, let's just drop this entirely."
Rip, rip. I don't know. I really love underwater in D&D. The underwater in my world is not very fleshed out. I think like a lot of people,
Hmm.
because there's a couple reasons why. One, players just don't go underwater
Yeah.
very much. Like there's not, like
I think it's
first
fun
like
too. I
underwater.
think I think I
Yeah.
wait. What I normally do is I wait till they're high level, then have
Yes.
them go in the water, first grab something, do something, whatever
Yep.
it is,
Yep.
because it weakens them severely.
It's extremely deadly to
Uh
have
huh.
combat in the water, and
And
everything else in the water is not hindered by that same hindrance. So you're
yes,
at a very big disadvantage. So it's really hard to incorporate into your games. Obviously, you can give people like freedom of movement and water breathing or whatever, and
yeah.
solve those problems. But
The rules as written say if you get the ability to breathe underwater, if you get a swim speed, then you can fight with very little hindrances in underwater.
I did
So
not
it's
know that.
it does, yeah. There's a lot of like hindrances besides like distance stuff for like ranged
Right.
weapons, but like fighting up close, most of those things do not affect you if you gain a swim speed. So if you give them a spell that like if they cast a spell that gives them a swim speed,
Mm,
they're just quote unquote just as good at fighting underwater as a merfolk.
interesting. I did not know that. I just always thought that it was. I don't know. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like having a swim speed doesn't mean that you can avoid swinging your sword in the
I
water
think it's just
easier.
saying that like you're able to dodge as easily as you normally would because you
Yep.
gained this ability to move in the water. You're not as hindered to hit people. Like I see why. I think
Yeah.
I mean at least in one of the um testing releases that they're doing for the new 1D&D, they played around with changing that and not
Yeah.
granting it if you just have a swim speed. So they might be going back on that in the next edition or
Yeah.
whatever we're calling 1D&D, but that was how it was originally.
Yeah, like, I understand. It's so much easier and nicer mechanically to be like you have a swim speed, you're fine. Like it's just nice that way because honestly, underwater is really cool in any kind of world, but it's so easy to just not be involved in it because A, you're going to get your players killed. B, your players don't want to die.
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah, they
And C,
understand
it's
how
just
debilitating it is.
yeah, like every time I'm a player, it's like, oh, we got an underwater quest. I'm like, well, say goodbye to my life, like we're
The main thing
you
that
know,
like I always is just as long as you make it clear to the players like what the problems are,
yeah,
they can easily prepare. They won't be
yeah,
using the best items anymore because
yeah,
like you have to use something that like moves forward in the water instead of like a
right,
bludgeoning device. You have to use
right,
like tridents and such because they
right.
work better underwater.
Yeah, and it's easy to give players, oh, you get tokens of, water breathing and whatever,
Yeah.
like you can do stuff like that, or like if somebody gives them a quest to go underwater, then they can provide them with, whatever they need, right? It's
Mhm.
easy to do that, but like when you're lower level, it's just kind of difficult to go into the water just in general.
Yeah.
Um, the second reason I think parties don't go in water is honestly, and this might be a hot take, and maybe it's because I don't know much about D&D as a whole, but there's not a lot to do underwater, to be honest. Like you got like a few things, like a few monsters and stuff, but ultimately, I think most everything is focused on not being underwater,
Um I don't know if I'd say that.
Because I mean, like, just compare. I mean, like in the real world, there's more stuff in our ocean than There's so much stuff in our ocean, and like in D&D, it's like, well, you got merfolk and you
Are
got
you saying there's not okay, I
tritons
you
and
were saying not a lot of stuff to do. You're not you
no,
were
just
so
like
I was confused. So you're saying there's not a lot of like options for creatures and things
yeah,
to find in the water. Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You're more limited. There are a lot. There are still some, but you're
Also
pretty
dragons
limited
have
in
swim
my
speeds,
opinion.
I will say. A
Oh
lot of them
yeah.
do.
Well, I've made a bunch of different dragons in my world that are all one. There's even one that is a water dragon.
Mhm.
so,
The tube that
um,
killed one of us.
yep, pretty much.
Yep. Yep.
pretty much.
I remember we went down into
Um,
that tunnel and it was like, "Oh,
yep.
their eyes looking at you," and we're like, "Shit."
yep. Yeah, they're I did never named them, but they're essentially steam dragons and they heat the water around you, so when you're in combat. They like burn your skin through hot water, and then they're essentially like sea serpents. But they're actually in my world. What was that?
I was just gonna say that idea of having these underwater creatures be more deadly by making it the area around them is deadly in some way is a very common thing for stat blocks for creatures underwater. Aboliths and such all have their own air aura around them.
I took inspiration a little bit from those higher CR creatures because in my world it's actually the strongest dragon is the I never named it, but the steam dragon. It's the hardest to kill. And the hardest CR. A, because it's underwater. That makes everything worse. But B, it can dispel magic and stuff too. So even if you're underwater with all those spells and stuff, boom, no longer have those anymore. So it's a pretty terrifying monstrosity to fight. But anyways, what I wanted to just dive into what you've done with underwater civilizations, underwater worlds. Have you done anything?
I did. I've talked about it on this podcast already for sure. It was between two continents, one slightly smaller continent than the other. The like trench between the two had an underwater civilization that was like every sentient underwater race. Now they had their own like tribes and other things elsewhere, but this was like their city/nation that was like its own sovereign thing. And so anybody who went over top them had to drop like the tariff or the fee to transport goods through their area.
I think I remember a little bit about this. I don't think you ever went into details.
I don't think I went into excessive detail, but yeah, I had like, there is a little bit of racism, and so they like this type of underwater race is treated worse than these ones, and so on. And so like I had all the like how the culture works kind of figured out.
Honestly, that's a really interesting point that I haven't really thought too much of. I was gonna talk more so along the lines of like, what resources would you get in trade with?
We did talk about that for sure.
Yeah, I know.
But the main thing is that they didn't have that. Like they don't have a fantastic resource. The resource is the water above them.
Right.
So like they harvested seaweed and things like that to like for food. They had all these different food sources with with fish and whatnot. But like their main way of making income and starting a like getting trade with other people is simply you have to pay to use our waters.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting, like if you focused a lot on water in D&D, an underwater civilization would be a really big fat pain in the butt to deal with because, boy, like your trade is going to be seriously hindered. If you like,
and it was right in the middle between two large nations that large continents that want to trade between the continents with a bunch of different nations that were on both continents. So everybody's wanting to travel there.
Yeah, I mean, like, what do you sail your ship over that? I mean, they easily sink it, and you can't do anything. I mean, unless your whole army is willing to have some sort of water breathing spell cast upon them, like you're not touching those guys, you know?
Yeah, even then, it's a dangerous choice.
Yeah, like that's brutal. And you can have like shark riders and. It makes me think of another Little Mermaid. Have you not have you seen it? Of course you've seen it. But when Poseidon comes riding in on like the dolphins carry his little chariot, it's so funny. Like stuff like that.
The way I had so my fun, I think. Water Nation was a lot of the more quote unquote I'll just say the non-humanoid races were like in power.
Yeah,
and any that were close to the humanoids that were on the surface were treated as lesser.
Which is kind of awkward.
Yeah, no, it is, but it's like they're seen as like they don't, because not everybody knows like how they came to be, but they're like, you look like you have some airborne influence, which is what they called the people above the airborne.
Oh, that's interesting. I like that. I have no underwater civilization in my world. I have one mini underwater civilization that you guys were going to experience and play in our campaign before it ended. It's actually in the city you guys were have been moving around in a bunch.
Yeah.
And the city has a collapsed portion. So the city is on this cliff that overlooks the coast, and a portion of the city had collapsed into the sea, and a bunch of thieves and things had developed. It's essentially a thieving underwater civilization where they had developed. You know those things in like Star Wars where they like put their like a device in their mouth and they can like breathe underwater. They had essentially made like enchantment things like that where they could breathe underwater, and they had like their storehouses and all sorts of stuff underneath the city in this like collapsed portion of the town that was underwater.
That's cool.
And so that's where they hid all of their stuff. And obviously the portion of the town that had fallen, there was still some above the water, and they had turned it into like boardwalks and houses that were like sitting on top of the water. But underwater was a whole entire criminal den, a criminal organization that people could go into.
That's cool.
Yeah, really fun.
Well, I think I'm going to cut us off here because we talked for way too long about this.
Yeah.
Because you went on that ramble about a favorite animated movie before you got into this.
Listen, I've got to build the suspense before we go.
The way to start this quickly would have been like, one of my favorite animated movies is Atlantis, and I wanted to talk about underwater.
No. You clearly don't understand the concept of a lukewarm open.
No, it's
rambling is required.
It's a ramble.
Rambling is required. You're just lucky I'm not talking about Love Island, because I've been watching it, so watch out.
So we got to talk about this topic. This topic is also pretty kind of related to what we were just talking about when it's interesting cities or civilizations.
Ooh.
I wanted during our build session this week, I wanted to build a city with you. Maybe even a city-state. So in my research, I searched for a unique city to inspire us, and came across the Yuan-ti city-state of Hlondeth.
Of Hwanda.
No, Hlondeth. Hlondeth.
Oh, okay.
For those,
that's why you sent me all these pictures of cool Yuan-ti and things.
Well, okay, hold on.
This first little guy is pretty cool.
For those who might not know, Yuan-ti are snake humanoids. And depending on how much of you is a snake, you are higher up in the society, as you are considered closer to their god and their, like, quote-unquote, perfect form.
Question for you.
Yes.
Are you allowed to play as a Yuan-ti that has, like, a snake body?
Yeah.
Like a snake tail?
Yeah.
Are you allowed to?
Yeah.
Shoot, that's going to be my next character. I got to make one. It'd be so much fun.
Go for it. Hlondeth.
I want to be a Yuan-ti that transforms into a giant snake.
So you're saying you want-ti play Yuan-ti?
Yeah. Okay, keep going.
Yeah. Hlondeth was a city made of a beautiful emerald-hued stone. This gave the city an almost snake-like coloration.
Wait a minute. What kind of stone is that? An emerald stone?
It's the emerald coloration to it. So it had a... I don't...
Okay.
We're in a fantasy world, Aaron. Not everything has to be perfect.
Emerald-hued stone. I gotta look this up. There's no such thing.
Let me there's probably not a thing, but I'll send you a picture of the city so that you can see what I'm talking about.
Maybe the whole city was ordered on Etsy because you can get emerald stones on Etsy. Actually, I'm almost certain there is. Colombian green, what? What is this? Oh, it's just an emerald gemstone. What is this? What'd you send me?
I sent you a picture of the city.
Oh, this is cool.
Yeah, see? Hold on. Now let me talk about it.
Well, we have to discuss the importance in scientific,
So it has this almost snake-like coloration, but the architecture took it a step beyond with all its tall, graceful arches and coils. It even tried to appear reminiscent of snake burrows with rounded doorways and foregoing stairs in favor of poles and ramps. This design also helped
I hate to be this...
the more snake-like Yuan-ti that didn't have legs.
I hate to be this guy, but who the heck are these random Joes down in the bottom corner?
Oh, I don't know the history of the image. It's just what they use.
Okay.
I'll read the caption. Harbors of Hlondeth and the city's unique serpentine architecture of green marble is what it says in the caption.
And there's two random white guys that are looking at it from a boat, I think, is what it should say, too.
I don't know if those are both guys,
continue.
but sure. One looks like a child.
I don't know. I think
and I can't tell
maybe. Yeah.
what gender, but it
Kind of looks
doesn't
like Luke
matter. It
Skywalker.
doesn't matter. It looks like Luke Skywalker. Yeah, sure. We'll go with that. It's Luke Skywalker.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Okay, I didn't know he was in D&D.
Hlondeth, being home of the Yuan-ti, held many creatures unseen in other areas of the world, as the Yuan-ti would experiment on creatures of all sorts.
What the heck?
This is just a common thing with Yuan-ti. They like to experiment on creatures, trying to make creatures, as in the D&D term, meaning everything.
Yeah, like literally everything.
There are so all sorts of creatures trying to make new servants to help them with their plans and strengthen their societies. They also had many slaves delivered here from all over. Hlondeth continued this tradition, employing ophidians, which were stubby, thick, snake humanoids that would turn any humanoid that they bit into one of them, like a lycanthrope, which I sent in Discord. There's an image. That was the first image I sent you.
Okay, these guys don't look like they would do that.
No, they don't look like they would turn you if you bit. They just look like another race. Like why would you turn? They're so cute though. They're also
they look like
the 5th edition image is so cute.
Yeah, they look like you would find them in like a little Chihuahua dog bed. Like, how do these guys turn you into? Their claws are pretty wicked though. Not gonna lie.
Now, next is the Histachi, which were humans that had been experimented on, turning them into reptilians, and their name meant egg watchers, as they protected the Yuan-ti broods. And finally, Svaklor. Now, Svaklor...
Wait, one more time? Svaklor?
Yes. Svaklor. Svaklor.
They would put double S.
Yeah, it's Yuan-ti. Svaklor were a new one for me. I hadn't heard anything about a Svaklor before. Svaklor are a Yuan-ti experiment on dragons.
I thought you were gonna say on drugs, like emphasizing the craziness of it.
No, I mean it's weird. It's wild. I'll post the picture in Discord for you.
Do they capture dragons and like turn them into snakes?
They capture eggs.
What it looks like.
They capture eggs.
Oh.
So then they mess with the eggs. So when they did their manipulation on the dragon eggs, they made them into lesser dragons that couldn't fly, but other than that, retained many of the powerful draconic abilities and magical resistances. But they all seemed less intelligent than a typical dragon, and all had poisonous breath instead of the many different breath weapons of dragons. With these protectors and the high walls of Hlondeth, it was a pretty well fortified city. Oh man.
And then the Spanish came.
Okay, well, this is when I started to research the government of Hlondeth. And I learned...
inspired by Aztec or Mayan or anything like that? That's what it looks like.
I learned something in the governmental structure that I didn't want to know.
Oh gosh.
So it's fine. I didn't want to yuck anyone's yum, but like I wasn't ready to hear this.
I'm ready for my yuck to be yummed.
Turns out that Yuan-ti can mate with Nagas. So I sent you in Discord an image of the Yuan-ti half-blood that was like that is the type that was mating with the Naga. Tail? So I sent a picture of a half-blood and the Naga. So
I love snakes. Snakes are so cool.
For those who don't know, I already described what a Yuan-ti were earlier. They're humanoids that are slightly snake-like. And the one who is the matriarch and head of this city has a solidly snake bottom half, like a lamia or something. Now, other than that, they're mostly human, or humanoid-looking. Her mate
it's Mr. Tumnus
was a Naga, which resembled a giant snake with a head that bore a hint of a humanoid appearance in its face.
Okay.
But other than that, it's just a big-ass snake.
How does that work? They got cloacas.
I think they both do. Like, they both have
both have cloacas.
They both have the snake parts. is what I assume.
Why don't we break down the anatomy of the Naga and the
the
Yuan-ti
Yuan-ti hatch eggs. We all know this. So that's
Do they actually?
yes.
Even like
Just
the pure
like
blood
Gith.
ones?
Just
Or
like
they're not
Gith.
pure bloods. Oh.
Because Gith do.
I didn't
and
know
Gith
that.
Are,
Why did
Gith
I-
are full humanoid.
Do they have like hatch chambers? 'Cause
Yeah,
that'd be really
they have
interesting.
broods.
Oh.
That's why they have the Hitachi, which I talked about earlier, which are the ones that protect their babies.
Huh.
Yeah, female Yuan-ti lay eggs in brood chambers, marking each clutch with its parentage, then abandoning them to the care of the brood guards, or the Hitachi, which I talked about earlier. Yuan-ti hatchlings are hatched from these eggs, which are always curious and eager to explore, and will seek food immediately, even eating each other if sustenance is not at hand. Yuan-ti!
Huh. I did not know.
So the ruler, the matriarch of the Hlondeth, is called Dediana Extaminos. And her mate, which I already said, is a spirit Naga called, which I'm gonna mess up this pronunciation, Sibilentanamus? Sibilentanamus.
Yes. That is correct.
I'm gonna spell it out. SSIBALENTANAMAS.
Yep. Sounded good to me.
Posting it in Discord so you can read it. Now,
Yeah, I think you're close,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Sibilentiamus.
they all start with double S, which I think is a really
Yeah.
cool little touch.
Now, Hlondeth had extensive connections to the fellow cities around them with trade and commerce. They even hired adventurers to protect their caravans as they traveled, as they had lots of commercial goods coming to and from. Hlondeth was one of the busiest ports in its region, called Vilhan Reach. It provided the south half of the Termish nation with most of its supplies, and traded with the settlements in the Shining Plains to their west. Now, the largest nation in the southwest of Vilhan Reach had a tenuous relationship, you could say, with Hlondeth, since its leader's kid, Hlondeth's leader, Demetrio Extaminos, was their representative there, and he was infatuated with the Baron's daughter, despite her rejecting his advances.
Uh-oh.
Now, Hlondeth used its connections to host an event called the South Sand Games between the nations of Termish and Chondath, gaining one great attention to itself and a lot of tourism, as people from both nations would come to watch these games, as well as the competitors. The people of Hlondeth had a culture focusing upon trade, nature, and even ritualized combat. Magic users weren't looked down upon, but they were seen as untrustworthy, and people were suspicious of them. Now, this one is a surprise to me, but makes sense for their situation. They were incredibly welcoming to most humanoids, which is
That
not
is surprising.
a typical Yuan-ti thing, but like Termish, Chondath, and the tribes that they traded with were mainly like human, elves, dwarves, like the classic Forgotten Realms races. So it makes sense they would have to be.
You know, I feel like I'm even more surprised about the fact that they don't like magic or people who use magic.
Yeah, and they
I
have
feel like
they
this-
have natural magic, and most of their
Yeah.
monsters that they create, their experiments, can't cast magic. I think they
Yeah,
just know
like-
how powerful it is, so it's not a we don't like using it. It's we know how dangerous you are.
You know, this is a really common problem in world building that's outside of D&D is balancing your magic system, because I'll tell you what, a lot of people's magic systems are extremely busted.
Skyrim.
You could not
Sorry, I have a little bit of cough.
yeah, true, but like you could not stand up to anything magic in a lot of world systems.
Yeah. Now, as I said, they were welcoming to most of these races. There are exceptions. There are classical races that in the Yuan-ti culture are just like always enslaved, and they do not get treated well in this city, like kobolds, as they're just immediately seen as you should be enslaved. You should not be walking around here.
You know.
one part that the article made a very specific point to stress that I really wanted to include in this was that they weren't sure why, but some suggested it was the serpentine magic flowing through the city, but for some reason, the inhabitants of the city had an unnatural fear of birds. This mainly focused on birds of prey, but even typically harmless birds, crows, ravens, seagulls, things like that, were given a wide berth and had an uneasy air around them.
It's pretty
They're
funny.
snakes. They
Is
don't
that
like
'cause little
birds.
snakes? Yeah. It's pretty funny.
The funny thing is, like, I've done research on Yuan-ti. That's not a comment. That's not like a thing that Yuan-ti have. That's just this city.
My character that I play next,
Yeah.
that's this Yuan-ti, is going to be afraid of birds. I've decided.
Now,
decided.
I could go into a lot more detail about the immaculate nature of their military, which took pride in cleanliness, or the green emerald-like coloration of the wizards of the city and the military
wait.
uniforms. But I think this is enough for now.
No, it's definitely not. The military liked cleanliness?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
I'll
Like,
read.
they
I'll
just
read the.
bathed?
Hlondeth warriors prided themselves in their immaculate appearance. They kept their gear repaired and polished, their blades were always freshly sharpened, and their clothes were clean and pristine. It's just a thing they liked, man.
What the heck? Well, like,
I could
doesn't
tell you
every
about how the
military
ale
like
was
that?
served with a small, raw, speckled egg floating in the drink in Hlondeth.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. It's like how you crack a fresh egg on ramen, but it doesn't
Yeah.
cook. It just goes down.
Hlondeth dish popular among visitors was its black adder stew. There's a lot of things to talk
Blackadder
about,
stew.
but we don't need to. We're already
This is what this podcast is about, though, talking about random crap.
random crap. That's true. Well, I think we should create our own city or city-state in our world, and then next week I'll go into I could go into in depth on Hlondethar's Hlondeth's history and how it came to be and stuff, and more detail
Okay.
on its culture. And then so we'll have 2 episodes to really dive into this one city/city-state.
Okay. Well, do you have thoughts? Do you have opening thoughts?
I do
Anything
not.
going into it that you were...
I wanted to
thinking
see
about?
what you wanted to start with based on our world as you know it now and kind of that kind of stuff.
Boy, I love creating cities, but it's always a big fat pain in the butt. You know what I'm saying? And from a D&D perspective in particular.
I
I
mean,
gotta make shops, and I gotta make shopkeepers, and
Mm-hmm.
I gotta make... Making a city, there's always so much stuff to make because players can go do whatever,
that's why
It's
I
not like they're in the middle of
I
nowhere.
will say this is where I like going and using, which I might get crucified for this, but
Uh-oh.
using
Ooh,
AI
hot take.
to aid me, because there's
Oh.
I gotta create like 20 different shops, multiple general
That wasn't-
stores, multiple magic shops, and I just get like the base, like give me a base understanding of what this shop looks like and maybe a name of its proprietor, and then I'll just take it from there and be like, I don't like that, I'm gonna change this proprietor's name to this, and then I'm gonna make them this race, and like it just helps me start that process and get it mostly like get me going.
Yeah, that wasn't the hot take I thought it was. I thought you were gonna.
A
be
lot
like,
of people
yeah, I
don't
like
like
stealing.
the use of AI.
Yeah, I thought you were gonna say, "Oh, I like taking art from AI and using it as my own and publishing it." Like, I don't know. Like, AI is a really useful tool
Yeah.
in that regard. To be
I will
honest.
say with the new
even-
updates to Windows 11, having the AI built into my computer is very nice.
Yeah, in school they encourage us to use AI for research because it's super helpful in research. It's so helpful. It can find things so much faster than I can. It is so awesome.
Mhm.
But anyways, but don't ever write with it because its writing sucks. But that's beside the
Oh,
point.
it totally does.
Anyways.
Suck. It totally does.
Yeah, it's terrible. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of places my mind went, and I guess we can kind of set a foundation, no pun intended, for our city here. First place my mind went is creating the city on the back of that Titan creature, but I don't know if I'm into doing that right now.
No.
Thoughts?
Let's not do that, city.
Yeah.
I want to
Yeah,
create like
I
an
agree.
actual on the ground city state like power source of power, whether it's like a
Yeah.
capital or whatever, but it's like a major location.
Okay. Yeah. Um, and
Maybe
do you want this to be an independent city state, or do you want this to be part of a actual nation?
I think either
What's
way, I'm
it,
good
it?
with either.
It might be hard to make it a part of an actual nation because we haven't made any nations. So
Yeah.
it might be a little difficult there. So making an independent city state might be a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if we do an independent city state, the very first thing that I like to talk about when I make a city is leadership and rulership, because that's how the city is going to, it's pretty much going to dictate everything about the city. So even its looks, and if it's clean and if it's nice. Like if you got a pirate overlord and you're making a pirate hideaway city on an island, um, it's going to look a whole lot different than if you have a monarch who believes they are God incarnate,
Mm-hmm.
versus if you have a council of rulers or elected officials or who knows. So
That's interesting. I
what are you
always
thinking?
start on the source, like where did the city come from?
Yeah, the reason I do rulers and leadership first, because I mostly am focused on what the current politics look like in the city, because my game is set in politics, and then I can flesh stuff out before. Um, so if I'm doing a D&D campaign, that's what I like to do first. If I am creating specifically for world building, I usually focus on like the founder of the city and the founding people of the city first, just because it's easier to make a group of people first and then incorporate what their cities and things look like and how they founded their cities.
Mm.
So I guess the question for you then is, do we want to focus on the background and the past of the city, or do we want to focus on what the city looks like now? Because we got 2 episodes.
I would say let's start with now,
Okay.
and then we'll build history next episode when we talk
Yeah.
about the history of this city.
Yeah. Let's do it. Okay. So now, I think we start with current leadership then, right? What do we see? Do we see a monarch, a city-state monarch? Would be very interesting. Do we see a group of people? Do we see another nation kind of rule over, like a vassal state? What are we seeing here?
I'm not sure. I'm going to be honest with you.
Mm.
I have never made a city state before because I don't totally
Okay.
understand that system, how that works.
Yeah.
How much
Yeah.
how big of an area do you have control over before it becomes not a city state anymore when it's just a nation?
So there's a couple in history. There's a couple things that dictate what a city state can and can't do, and it's almost exclusively reliant on the people that are the nations that are surrounding them. So some city states are a lot bigger and a lot more prosperous because of the nations that are around them. The problem with being a city state is you're small, right? So you're a city, and that's pretty much it, So most city states are pretty heavily reliant on trade, but a lot of trade, a lot of cities just in general are reliant on trade. But when you only have your city and a little bit of the land surrounding it, it can be pretty rough. And then a lot of city states are vassals, which at that point you can debate whether they're city states or not. And a vassal is just, you're pretty much ruled over by somebody else, but you have slight authority in what goes on in your world. So personally, I like the idea of creating a couple of different things. One, we could create like a Venice-like city that is very trade heavy, that's like on the coast. 2, I think it'd be really fun to do like a pirate city that's, like its own little criminal organization city. In one of my worlds, Criminal's Den, they pretty much own several different cities
Mm-hmm.
that are really, really fun to mess around with. Like messing around with the lawlessness of a city is always really fun. Like there are no laws here except for don't steal from your fellow thief, like the classic. Those are always really fun because they're always kind of, difficult to figure out what's going on in the city and how to incorporate it.
Mm-hmm.
But for this, I think my first thought is I really like the idea of just a really simple like monarch who rules over this city. And I think this monarch is in fear that their city is no longer going to be a city state anymore and controlled and ruled over by somebody.
Hmm.
Thoughts?
Okay, so wait, why do they fear this? Like, why is this happening?
Yeah, so I think right now, if I have a paranoid leader, and we'll kind of get to why this is happening, but if I have a paranoid leader, it's going to impact a lot of what goes on within the city. So I think this would be happening because free states are really easy to pick on. So free states are really, really easy to take control and take over.
Mm.
So if I'm looking, as any nation surrounding this city state, if I'm looking to take over, it's pretty simple, really. So I think there's a couple things that I want this city to do if this leader is paranoid and it's a free city state. One, I want this leader to have a pretty bolstered defense, and we can get creative of what that is. Whether that is he's hired some sort of mage to incorporate a really cool magical defense, or whether that's the walls of Constantinople, where like he has 4 layers of walls and it's hard to get past these walls, and there's all sorts of traps and defenses that you can't get in. I think those are would be the two traditional places of my mind. And then second, I think this paranoid leader is pretty closed off to the outside world. Getting in and out, you have to go through checkpoints and trade. Like guards have to meticulously check your wares and your goods. But it's a kind of a contrast because this city has to be heavily reliant on trade because it is a city state. So that's what I'm thinking. Thoughts, questions? I'm rambling. I'm going for it.
I think that's good. I think that's an interesting place of a paranoid leader, the nervous about being taken over. I think that's interesting. I think my next question for you would be, one, why hasn't this happened before? And two is so what protections do they have and stuff? Like you talked about wizards and things, but I was just looking for because I'm curious if it's like they're actually in a really good spot where it's really hard for them to be attacked from one side, and then they have really good protection protecting their other side, whether it's like really good relationship with a nation or whatever that like has their back. And then also why is the leader's fear of being taken over partially is it founded, or is he paranoid and insane?
Oh man, that's a juicy. I always love a paranoid and insane.
I would say let's
ruler.
not do paranoid insane because it's very tropey at this point. But it is fun. It's fun to do.
It's very
but
fun.
Let's say no.
I was gonna say the same thing. I love a paranoid tropey leader, but I think I want to avoid that for this one. It doesn't mean that I don't want him to be a little bit unjustified, but I want him to be smart and tactical about his paranoia and not insane and killing his people or whatever, So I think one, I want the defenses. I really want to make something unique with the defenses. I want to make some sort of magical barrier, like you have to walk through, and like I'm thinking like an actual like shield of some kind. And like when you come to the city gates, there's obviously a physical wall, but there's like mages have to like open up this section of the shield for you to pass through. Like I'm thinking something like hardcore and extreme like that, where like you can't shoot arrows into it, you can't shoot arrows out of it. Like it's
this is
like almost
really
like a wall
powerful
of force.
Magic.
Yeah. And I want the leader to be paranoid for twofold reasons. One, to get access to this powerful magic, he's made some sort of deal with some sort of entity to maintain his power and hold on the city. In return, this entity provides him protection and helps him maintain his leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to tie it into the big bad evil guy somehow. Not that this leader is bad, but that he is that this leader is
maybe this is where they grew up.
It could be. I think I want to workshop it. I want a week to think about it. But I'm thinking this leader has made this pact, and the entity he's made a pact with, unknown yet. I don't know yet. I don't know what I want it to be. But either way, this entity has provided him with. Do I want this entity to give the ruler the power to create this powerful magic, like a wall of force, right? Or do I want it to have been created by the entity? And I'm leaning towards the latter because the former.
I don't like either, honestly.
You don't?
No. I want.
What's your thoughts?
I want something about this city, whether like maybe they invented it, like some people inside of it, or like Like, honestly, the thing I'm thinking, the closest thing I can think of that in a story or in a book or in lore that I know of that somebody has done something similar was like a mythalar, where it's like I can set some parameter in this large protective sphere that could be like, hey, people can't cast spells, or everybody can fly, or no dragons allowed. Like you could, and like the big like thing that was between all of them, which I really liked because it was kind of a reasoning why not everybody in the world can do this, is they all needed a massive power source.
So my if I'm going with the which we don't have to, that's totally fine. If I'm going with like this pact, which I think would be really interesting, but if we're going with this pact, it could be cool if like this entity gave them a power source and they have learned how to use it and control and make something with it. Could be interesting as well. You could also then play around with the idea of like people trying to break it or steal it eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Could be kind of fun.
Yeah,
Um,
I
so I like that.
there's also the idea popped into my head about this almost being a spite protection, where like
Protecting.
one nation really wants this, and a god doesn't care about this nation. Like it doesn't care about the city state at all. But it understands that this other nation really wants that territory, whether they have a good mine or like they have something that other nations want to control them for. And almost to spite them, this like, a god gave them a source of protection.
It could be really interesting to have this city state have control of a pillar.
That's a great idea. That could be the power
Yeah.
source. Ooh, and then
Yeah.
a fun thing you could do like partway through the story would be have this one be the next one to start crumbling.
And that was my that's where that's where I'm gonna that's where I was going
That's
with it,
awesome.
I think,
That's a fantastic idea. I love that. I love that.
yeah. So this city state has sole control over a pillar.
Is it
And this
is
leader,
it secret? Do people only know about the
man.
protective barrier? They don't know the pillar.
I think I want to say the majority don't, right?
Yeah.
Like I want to say
I like that too.
It's yeah. I want to say it's a pretty secret thing.
And that's why I think it would be really fun if the party has seen pillars like destroyed before, and then have them go to the city and be like, what's happening is reminding you a lot of or just describing it and having the players pick up on it themselves, that like, wait, isn't this what happened in that story about that other city that got destroyed? And you're like, oh,
Yeah,
maybe it does sound similar.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, you could lay a bunch of really interesting hints for sure about this city like harboring a pillar. Which what we have to get into the past then of how this city became founded on this pillar. That's a whole that's next episode. But so I'm thinking right now, this leader doesn't want to relinquish control of the pillar. Does this leader want to be a god? Why does this leader want control of the pillar? I don't think this leader
I
wants
was going
to
to
be a
say,
god.
the next question was, do they know about the Ascension ritual? Which we said not a lot of people know about.
Yeah.
What if it's like a almost like self-fulfilling prophecy, where this which will be going in the direction of crazy, insane leader, but like the world doesn't know about this pillar, but this lord has kind of convinced themselves or is so in their head that like everybody knows about this pillar and everyone's coming to get it.
I think that would. I think that. I actually don't think that falls into crazy insane leader because I think that would be a pretty natural.
But like the thing is like
thought.
The truth is that they don't. But this is where the person is
Yeah.
thinking it. And maybe like
See, I think
one or two people know because they had a spy that found it or whatever. But I don't think the world.
I don't see. There's a couple. If we go the route that the world knows or a nation knows, you would have definitely a lot of conflict, which could be pretty fun, right? Like you could definitely have some fun. Heck, you could even have some fun city battles or whatever within D&D, right? Where like the players get to choose if they want to be with this nation and break down these magical barriers and attack the city, or if they want to be part of the defending force. It could be pretty fun. If people know, doesn't mean they can't find out during the campaign. I think this is more of a paranoia in preparation for such things to occur. So I think this leader knows not many know about this pillar.
Mm-hmm.
He's worried about people finding out about this pillar. And um, I think the nations around him obviously want this city state, want to trade with this city state, either want to take it over, anything like that. And so he's just preparing for the worst because he does not want to lose his throne, but also his pillar. And I think this leader, I want to go a little bit against the mean monarch trope, and I kind of want to do a more of a benevolent monarch for a couple reasons. One, I think he's a good ruler to his people. I don't think he is, I don't think he's a monarch that takes everything from them and lives in his own wealth and riches.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, you can have an insane ruler that's not oppressive.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
He could be loved by everybody for.
yeah. I want to play that route. And I think there's a couple reasons for it. One, I think I want this city to seem like a good place to be. But there's a constant wariness of why you have to go through, these different protocols in order to enter the city or in order to be a part of the city. And I want them to be doing something with the pillar that is not Ascension, the city itself.
Mm-hmm.
So whether that's like harvesting magical essence, and that harvesting of magical essence is going to attract this big bad evil creature that we have going around the world.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of what I'm doing, and this magical essence, can do something, and we can tie it a little bit into the cult too. I think, not that the cult is anywhere in the vicinity of this city, but it's similar to how the cult consumes the failed essence. Like if you, I don't know if I want it to be like if you can grow plants better with this essence, and you can, or if I want like if you drink this essence you can have more powerful magic. I don't know what I want this essence to be, but I think they're harvesting some sort of resource from the pillar as a main
okay, here
staple,
before we decide what it is that they're getting from this pillar, we need to decide what type of pillar. Because
oh yeah, true.
we talked already multiple times, I think, about pillars that are like forest, like large trees. But like this, let's make this something different. And what do we see this one as? Is this like just a large stone, like a big stone that rises to the sky, like almost like a
oh man
piece of gem, like a piece of crystal, like crystalline structures to it, or like how do we? What is this?
Boy, a giant crystal in the middle of the city would be a very hot commodity.
See, I wasn't thinking crystal. I was thinking like it's literally like a stone, but it almost, the shape of it is almost crystalline in nature. But it's still just like basic gray rock.
I don't mind that idea. I want to explore other ideas too, though. What
totally.
other things we could go with the we could go with the underwater theme and have it be like some sort of reef, like a coral reef. Be interesting, but I don't know if I like that. I feel like, obviously we have a tree. I think is a really good idea for a pillar, right? Obviously, I actually think a coral reef is probably a pretty good idea for a pillar. Like there's one underwater that's a coral reef, and there's
That would be awesome.
yeah, and there's like a civilization around it or whatever. I think that'd be great. I like the idea of a mountain one, or a stone one, like we were talking about. I like that a lot too. I don't know if I see a city. I don't want it to be a tree because that just screams more nature-y to me. You know what I'm saying? And I don't want this city to be like a nature city. I want this city to be like a modern, European style, medieval city where, it just exists as its own free city state. Boy, what else would we have? A wall of flesh, that'd be. Can't do that. I can't do that. A giant gem would be interesting too. I actually like that as an idea for a pillar, but I don't see that here. Do we want this to be more hidden, or do we want it to be like the centerpiece of the city?
I think it depends how much the citizens know about this. Because especially if they're like gathering something from it, unless they're gathering it from like below the surface, like a dungeon that they've created that like leads to its like base, I think it has to be hidden. Unless
honestly, I think a stone is probably our best bet.
Yeah.
I think that's probably our best bet, and they're harvesting the crystal essence inside or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think would be a pretty. Do we want them to be breaking this pillar? Like, are they actually chipping away crystal
Yeah,
and selling it?
I think they are.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I like that a
I
lot.
like to think. I
Um,
would like to think that at some point the monster that we've created gets close to this city and begins to smell and maybe is like drawn to the city and then like half attacks the city because partway through it realizes like there's not actually any food here, but like what they're
yeah,
doing attracted it.
I think this is gonna be a place where the monster attacks for sure because they're harvesting. They're harvesting and playing around with the magical essence of a pillar,
Mm-hmm.
and I think there is going to be failed magical essence as a result. I think just guaranteed, just based on harvesting and breaking this pillar, there's going to be, you know, some of this leftover residual that this monster is looking for. Um, I think for sure. So, I think what I want is I think this pillar is probably not going to be the centerpiece of a city. Um, I just think if it was, I don't like the idea of like a city surrounding like a big giant,
Mm-hmm.
you know, stone. It could be fun to have like a portion of it and it's like a symbol of the city. You could do like a Minas Tirith thing where you have like Lord of the Rings, where you have a giant stone protruding that the city is partially built on. But
Yeah.
I don't like that either. So
Okay. See, I
you
was
do you
thinking I
like
was
that?
thinking something like that where it's like there is a pillar here, but you don't see that because everything was built upon it. So
So do you
you
want it to
like
be built?
I think my question to you would be how much destruction can happen to a pillar?
I think you can probably break the whole thing.
What if they chopped enough off the top that it is a flat surface?
And they have a city up on top of that.
No. The city is on top and below it. And like this
Hmm.
quote unquote pillar is really tall, but half of it or more is under the ground.
Yeah, I
Like an
think
iceberg.
I definitely want the majority of it to be underground. I think that's a really fun
So they just kind of cut off the
concept.
top and like maybe there's like the noble area up on top of that and then like the middle class poor area is down below.
Yeah, and I think and maybe they're obviously going to be using that as a defensive
Mm.
thing as well, right? So like in order to take the city, you have to climb all the way up the mountain, right?
Yeah, I
Um,
think for them they have like pulley systems that have like almost like elevators that go up, but they can
well, I'm
easily
thinking,
destroy those when somebody is sieging, so that they have to climb all the way up.
yeah. Oh, and I'm thinking now. I mean, am I picturing the city then like? Do we want this to be a very prosperous city because of trade? Like just in general, like are we talking hanging gardens that are hanging down from this, rock face as well with like varying levels that you have to climb up to get to each different level? Like they've, created rings or barriers that you have to go up again, like a Minas Tirith type thing. Um,
I could
or
definitely
are we
see it being a
thinking,
very because I kind of want the city state in a very dangerous area.
yeah, or my other thought was like, are we thinking more of like a Edoras, which is another Lord of the Rings city, where it's just built on a hill, like it's just, and the wall surrounds the hill, and the city is just built on the hill.
Mm, I like the two-tier system, but if you prefer hill, I'm good with hill.
Boy, man, I like both. I like both. I think like the simplicity of just the hill intrigues me
Mm-hmm.
because it seems a little bit less imposing of an ordeal. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like if you have this whole city based on, I mean, would it be a mountain? Like, are we talking like a lonely mountain type thing, like this giant stone? Or are we talking, I think just like a little hill that has a whole modern city, like a whole city built on top of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, is probably what I like best, and I think there's still rings within the city. So you have everybody is still contained within the outer wall. I think everybody still is. Obviously you have your farmsteads and stuff outside for farming, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but everybody is contained within the outer wall. And I even think it's probably called like the outer wall, right? Like maybe a little bit of Attack on Titan type thing going on here. Um, Not that big of a wall, but they have like this whole outer wall that surrounds the entire city. And then as you pass through I think the very beginning of the city would be oriented like a market. When you first walk in, that's where trade happens. That's where the market is, because they don't want you. The leader doesn't want. He's oriented the city in such a way that they don't want people going further and further into the city, right? So everything guests and trade needs are, within the first ring of the city. So you can go anywhere within the first ring of the city, but getting into the second ring of the city is virtually impossible. I think that would be very interesting. I think it would also make the players very interested in what's going on. So they're led into the first ring of the city. They are not allowed at all past the second wall, right? Just not at all. And I think it'd be under the guise of only nobility and, the richer members of society are allowed within the middle ring. And then even those people are not allowed in the third ring of the city. And the third ring of the city is sealed off for strictly the nobility of the city, the people who rule the city. That's the monarch and his little, court or whatever, right? That's it. And I think it would be very intriguing to, sorry, you can't go anywhere past the rest of this part of the city. Thoughts?
I think that's cool. I think it will be intriguing for players and stuff. And I think I have to cut us off here.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to have multiple. We're gonna have to.
We'll talk about this. We'll talk about this next episode for sure. I'll dive into the history and kind of a little more into Hlondeth as we know it. Because we still have to talk about a lot of stuff about the city.
Oh man. Oh yeah. We've only scratched the surface. No pun intended of what they're doing to the pillar.
Yes. Well, thank you all for listening. This has been episode 109 of Dungeoneers.
Woo!
We're doing it. We're back.
We are.
If you'd like to write to us, you can write to us at dungeoneerd@gmail.com. Right, Aaron?
That is correct.
We may have lost access to that for a little bit, but we've gained access back to that email as Aaron had the password and he found it.
Let's just say I'm the best podcast partner.
The best. The truly the best.
Responsible. I know what's going on.
Definitely not the reason why we didn't record for a year. But
Yep. Exactly. Hey, I came back.
You did.
Okay?
You did.
I came
with
back.
style. You came back.
With style.
But yes, we'd love to hear from you. Dungeoneerd@gmail.com if you have any ideas for topics, lukewarm opens, or recipes, or whatever. Of course, no soliciting, but... And if you listen to us on your podcasting apps with ratings and reviews, it really helps the show. If you write a review, let people know, hey, the show's actually really good. You should try it out. It really helps the show by not just getting people to understand the show before they come in, but also it allows the apps to know that, hey, people are enjoying this show. So, yeah.
Did you know there are solid black chickens?
Yeah.
Like everything.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that.
I knew there was some that were solid black, and then I knew there were some that were black, but had like the little like gullet stuff.
They're so
that
cool.
Was red still, that's the ones I prefer.
Yeah.
The ones that are still red in the little gullet and beak, but like
those are just so original, and lame though. These ones are cool.
Well,
anyways, continue.
As we suddenly got onto the topic of chicken coloration, as one does when recording any podcast.
Yes.
Thank you all for listening. And as I always say, always remember to be the sharpest barrel
How do I not know?
in the bunch. See you next time.
Bye. I'm going quick. I'm out of here.
I got you on that one.